For like driving and just navigating
Well, like
life?
I can see you guys. You're a little bit blurry, but like when you came out earlier, you were just blurry.
Really?
Yeah, I couldn't see you.
Actually, he was moving really fast.
Yeah, and if I was driving, I wouldn't be able to see. But this is what I was like for ages, just blind.
Just didn't
And it's
know
like
it,
HD.
I always think that like because you don't know what anyone else's eyesight's like. How do you really know if yours is actually any good?
Yeah. You go get your eyes tested.
Yeah. Well, they tell you, but what if my version of blue is a different version of your blue or something?
Oh, that's too down the rabbit hole, is
How are we
that?
going to figure it out?
Yeah. I don't think there is any way to definitively say, is my blue the same as your blue, is there?
Something the mantis shrimp has, so we've got 3 cones in our eyes, which allows us to see like all the colours that we can see. Dogs only have 2 cones in their eyes. A mantis shrimp has 18 different cones in its eyes. Oh, wow. So they can see colours that we can't even think of. They can see like ultraviolet light, they can see infrared light. So the way they experience the world must be like so different from the way we experience the world.
Isn't that like sharks as well? They can taste blood in the water like a mile away. Or something. It's maybe not exactly a mile, but it's certainly a significant distance. Like to have such a sensitive...
No, it's like my nose, isn't it, on the maps?
There was an interesting podcast.
It's just another stage of the evolution process.
Lex Freeman did an interesting podcast with this guy. He was saying pretty much because we can only experience the world through our senses, and we know there's like things like the mantis shrimp out there. Pretty much everything we know or feel to be, the way we think it is true, is probably false. Because of our limited way to perceive the world.
Yes. And there's so much we're missing out on.
Yeah.
Like we can't see something like 90% of what's out there.
Yeah.
Gravity, magnetism, ultraviolet light, infrared,
But not only that, like Jordan Peterson talks about, like we literally see, there's so many things right now in this room to focus on, but our eyes are focused on one specific thing that we are prioritising as the most important. So then we're filtering out everything else.
Yeah. I think it's like if you hold your thumb out like that, and it's the size of your thumbnail that your eye actually can see properly, and the rest is just filled in by your brain's kind of expectation of what should be like there, pretty much.
Yeah, like it paints in what it assumes.
Yeah, a proper focus, I guess.
But I mean, I wouldn't give up being a human to be able to see ultraviolet light.
To be a shrimp.
To be a shrimp or a shark.
Shrimping it easy,
I think we're still nailing those guys on our ability to navigate the world.
Would you swap being a
Not
human?
that they would know that.
Would you swap being a human for any other animal's life?
No.
House cat?
No.
House cat's a good life.
It's a pretty good life.
It's a good life. Very important with zero responsibility.
Might be really boring.
You sleep and eat and just get loved.
My cat,
kind of
well,
vibe.
Betty, she's like the guard cat though, so she's on edge all the time. She's figuring it out, she's in charge, She doesn't chill out. She follows you around. Make sure you're all right,
That's cool.
All right. Welcome to the North Leeds Jitz podcast, where we talk about animal facts and deep topics. This week on the show, Tom Broughton's back.
Woo.
All right.
Professor Mike.
Hello.
Coach Lauren.
Boom.
Boom.
I don't even know if that got on camera. I can't see.
All right. And Tom, we were saying we need a title for you. We need questions or topics master Tom, something like that.
Master
Yeah, I
Tom.
just think random guys, fine. Donny. Chief Donny at GBRL.
You should say that anymore.
No, I don't.
Oh yeah, because
I
it
don't think
does
you can.
have different interpretations. Don't Google it at work.
Sam
is
and
what I'd
Joe.
say.
They
We need
can
to have
Google
words,
it.
Sam and Joe, I think.
I'm just happy
Set you
to
up.
be in your company and
He's like the quizmaster, and he's like, them game shows at 5 o'clock on
You should have been sat in
ITV.
the middle.
Richard Osmond or whatever. He's like the guy
with
with
my
the cards.
cards.
Yeah,
Welcome to another episode. I'm just happy to be here in your company as and when it might be opportune. So yeah, thanks for having me again.
All right, so do you have a topic for us to get started off with?
So I thought it was really interesting what Lauren was saying earlier about, was it Sophie had come down to the comp class last night? So is that, in terms of ladies who come down to the comp class, is it you two at the moment?
Yeah.
All ladies? Cool.
It was just me, wasn't it?
Pretty much hard to wrangle anyone for the comp team at the moment.
Yeah,
Lauren
it's
has to
slim
get her,
pickings, isn't it? Yeah.
Why do we think that is?
She
'Cause
holds a knife to
that's
people's
I was
throats.
saying this because it seemed to have died off.
I don't know why. I think probably after you left, they were like, I don't want to do Coach C's comp class.
Do you
Because
think
a lot of people will be like, "Oh yeah, I'm competing this year," and I'm like, "Oh, are you going to come down?" Because that does annoy me a little bit. Is when people say they're going to compete, but they only like utilize the group when they're competing.
Yes.
Like I think that's a bit selfish.
Yeah.
Because I turn up regardless for myself, but for the others to be able to train as well and to be consistent with my training. I'm not just going to rock up for 2 weeks before my comp and then be like, "Oh, see ya."
I was giving Rob Salverson a lot of shit jokingly yesterday because he
deserves it,
decided
though.
to do Nogi Live
Yeah.
instead of comp team. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, selfish Rob Salverson, working for himself and not for the team.
I mean, it might be worth just reframing, like, for people who are new to the academy, again, like what that comp team is.
Yeah. I think
Because like we started that as an additional class, which was above the membership, which was free to people who wanted to represent the academy in competition. And I think we have to get back to that, right? Because, I mean, not me at the moment, we give up our time on a Tuesday night late to be in that class to try and give you something extra. It's always the most intense class of the week.
Yeah.
It's always extra stuff you're not going to get in the curriculum. You know, if we're going to show up and do that, like, there's no point doing it if people aren't going to show up. And so if people aren't going to show up, then they're not going to compete. And I would, like you're saying, I think it needs to be something that's, like, I'm cool with people dipping in and out to a degree, but you should be in that team and part of the team. And the other thing that's important about that team, and as I've always said privately in that class, we'll air it now, is that in my view, you are kind of, you've got like an ambassadorial role. People look up to you because not everyone has the courage to compete. I think one of your topics is about competition today, Tom.
Yeah.
And so when people see you on the map, putting yourself out there, they're inspired by it. They're inspired by anyone who goes out there and, you know, opens himself up to victory or defeat. So I think we need to reframe that comp class. When I come back in March, April, we'll just have a pause and we'll have a think about, is it a class that people can just turn up to whenever they want?
Yeah.
Or is it something that's a bit more special that we put on and provide for people who want to push themselves to the limit of their perceived ability? Because if it is that, you got to show up.
Yeah, there was a lot of, we were talking a lot about it when we changed the timing of it. I can't remember when it was before.
Earlier,
Yeah. We're talking about whether we even continue to do it or if we do it on like a comp team season type thing. Because I think even then there was a point where we were struggling to get people in. That's why we gave out that little survey. And people were like, oh, it's a bit too late or it's a bit too wide after training late. But yeah, I think it's definitely a really fun class to teach.
Yeah. And it is worth saying that the people who go to it regularly say, this is my favourite class of the week, without hesitation. And it was the same before, Professor Mike, before you went and you did your row and for Coach T now. So it is the most fun. It's also
really challenging.
a challenging class, but rightly so, because you're going to go compete. And as Professor Mike says, you're out on the map.
I mean, we're looking at a schedule. There will be additional classes within the schedule coming up, right, which we can kind of talk about to a degree. We don't want to announce what it's going to be, but we've got plans to do that. Like that Tuesday night class, I'm going to be around on Tuesday nights. That could be a GB3 class with an hour's worth of GB3 like live training, which is intense, tough training, gi no gi. That's the same as comp class to a degree. Like, and then anyone can show up whether they're competing or not. So by saying you're a competitor and representing the academy and then not showing up, you're kind of not allowing non-competitors to train in a way. It's a bit selfish too, like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh no, I'm in the comp team, I want the class, but I'm not going to come to training. Well, that could be a regular class for other people. Could be another no-gi, could be GB2, could be GB3, could be GB1. So I think we need to take stock of it perhaps.
The only thing that's really changed in the comp class, just thinking about it, is the makeup of the belts. So before it was a lot of, when it was really busy, it was three stripe and 4 stripe white belts, whereas it feels now most people are blue belts. And maybe it's a sea change where everyone's gone from the top of the pile as white belts to the bottom of the pile as blue. And maybe there's a perceived resistance to wanting to step on the mat because of the disparity in skill level with a blue belt. You know, a 4-stripe blue belt is a very different thing to a...
Yeah, I mean, that always happens.
Yeah.
It's the classic, I've got my blue belt, I'm not going to compete yet, I'm going to give it 6 months. Like, no. If you look at our track record in competition with our blue belts, they've gone straight in and medalled. Like, once you get given that blue belt, you were a blue belt. Of course, there's going to be always people who have got more experience, better, whatever. That shouldn't stop you competing. If that's a reason, it's not a good reason.
Yeah.
It's a bad reason.
I think as well, because we've not had anyone new apart from Sophie, I think there'll be newer people that maybe aren't sure what it is or how to go about joining.
Yeah.
I think there'll be people that want to
for
join.
the kids comp teams, like when was like the last, well, apart from Ruben, like we don't get any new kids comp team members,
No,
really,
we
do
don't.
we?
No.
Despite us kind of picking up new kids fairly regularly in not regular classes.
To hold auditions.
Well, yeah, well, maybe we need to just do some tryouts.
Tryouts.
Well, maybe we just need to just, as we release this new schedule in a month or two, we just take stock and we ask people what they want. But again, if we're going to ask people what they want and they tell us that's what they want, you've got to come do it. Because otherwise, it's kind of not fair on everyone else.
Yeah. Good stuff. What was the question again?
Oh, we were talking about...
You could move on to the competition.
Yeah, so I suppose that flows nicely. And the thing that I wanted to ask is, do you regularly get people coming to talk to you about, Question Mark, Coach T, should I be competing? What do you think about competing? Do you think that everyone should? Is it a necessary component of the jiu-jitsu journey?
I'd say no, it's not necessarily. It has a lot of benefits.
Yeah.
But I would never say you have to compete to someone.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it's necessary. I think for a lot of people, it's the next step in jiu-jitsu where it takes a lot of courage to come in for your first trial class.
Yeah.
Like a lot of courage to come in for a room full of strangers and do a martial art for the first time. And then I think once you kind of got to that, you can get into this position where you're doing a difficult thing like jiu-jitsu, but really you love doing it. So it's not even getting out of your comfort zone anymore.
Yes.
Whereas for your first couple of months, you were really getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
So I think once you kind of hit that level, it's good to then go get out of your comfort zone again. And that might be for some people competing.
Yes.
And I think getting out of your comfort zone that way and being in front of people doing your jiu-jitsu. So I think that can be real growth for some people. I've also known other people who've gone out and competed and it's been more detrimental to their jiu-jitsu and it's kind of pushed them further away from it. So I think it's to each their own. I think you can gain a lot from competing, but I would never say to someone like, I think I'd say to someone, I think you can gain a lot from competing, but I wouldn't be like, Tom, you got to compete, man. Like,
got to do it.
You got to do it. Like, that's my thoughts. What about you?
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's huge benefits to it. I don't see any downsides to it other than perhaps a bad experience. But again, that's how you perceive it. You can always use perspective to say, well, I learned a lot. I view competition as pressing fast forward on your development by, I used to say about 3 months. Like the stuff I learned in competition, particularly losing, but winning as well, I never forgot. I can still remember it right now. Mistakes I made, things I did well. And you don't get that in your weekly classes. So I think actually, if you want to either get really good at jiu-jitsu for you, go compete. The other benefit from competition is just providing a focus for you. So setting a goal, which is I'm going to compete at the English Open in January or whenever it is. And now it's the summer. I've got 6 months. So you've got to focus because it's not just your jiu-jitsu, it's your weight, it's your fitness, it's your health, it's your recovery. And that's a really lovely goal for people to have within jiu-jitsu. So I think there's multiple benefits to it. I don't see a massive downside to competing. But I've also known people who, because just because you compete doesn't mean you're better. I've met people along the journey who are absolute savages in the gym and never compete. And if they went out on the competition scene, they would clean up. But Homolo Bahal had a famous guy, brown belt, blonde hair, can't remember his name, but he would like roll with Keenan and just like hold his own or smash him. If he ever competed, everyone said he'd be world champion tomorrow. He just didn't want to compete. And that's fine as well. Like, it depends why you're here, doesn't it?
On that, we talked a few podcasts ago about the does competition kind of speed your development?
Yes.
I think it does, but we kind of like unpicked it a little bit, and it's not the fact that you're in a like competition that it's not magic that you've signed up for it. You put your name down for a comp, and now you're going to get better at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
It's the fact that mistakes now have consequences that you are going to look to address.
Yeah.
So I think you can get a similar vibe. Like I've heard stories about Braulio where if you catch it, someone ever caught him in submission, he would be like obsessed with it until like you never caught him in it again, and that's just in the training room. And that's what most people do in competition. They get a guard pass somehow, like, right, I'm going to figure out how that, you can never get my guard pass like that again. Or they get subbed and like, right, that's never happened to me again now. But in the training room, we're like, you caught me. What it is,
Yes.
Forget about it, don't address it. You don't go home and be like, right, I'm going to spend the next 3 weeks figuring out how that can never happen again. So I think we learn from our mistakes more at competition.
Yeah, because the stakes higher.
Because the stakes are higher.
Yeah.
You got people watching you. There's like a definitive win or loss. You're going to get a medal or not get a medal. So
it's also an event, and because it's an event, you just are more tuned in. Because I think it's the same for seminars. Like if you come to a seminar, generally remember those techniques much more deeply than you do just coming to class on a Monday night.
Yeah.
I think it's the fact that your brain and your body is attuned to this one event, so you're naturally going to remember it. But I think you're right. We have to remember that 95% of our students, probably even higher than that, are here for different reasons than competition.
Yeah.
And so I don't expect us to have 50 people down at comp class on a Tuesday night.
I think going back to what you were saying though, I think from like personal development things, I think this is what I've learned, and I was talking to Amy and Steve about it because Amy she's wanting to do it, but more for like her personal development, because I think 99% of the people, like you said, to go and compete, it's like a scary thing. We don't want to do it. We don't want to put ourselves out there and be judged. But I think for a lot of people, I think what I did in the beginning is thinking the goal was to win.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to be your goal. Your goal could just be just stepping on that mat.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
And like for me, that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Or it might be like when Gabe competed, he was laughing because he was saying you normally give him like a big speech in the car. So we were like talking about it because he was competing against some guy that had like won loads, and he's like, I'm not going to win, what's the point? And I was like, well, that doesn't have to be your goal. I was like, why doesn't your goal be control your emotions, and whatever happens, you come off the mat smiling? And he was like, oh, all right, okay. And he did. So it doesn't have to be you're going to win gold, because that doesn't have to be your goal. And that's what I've learned through doing competition. And for me, I want to keep doing that for my personal development, whether I win or not. And then, like you said, when it comes to jiu-jitsu, you learn your development through that. But I think for your personal development as well, I think if that's something you want to do, I would encourage you to do it for that reason.
Yeah.
I think I would agree with everything you say, but I would also say that that's, I think, more important on the post competition. I think but to get those benefits, you also have to go in there with a mindset that I am going to try and win.
Yeah.
Because if you go in, because I do this when I'm at competition, where I go in, I'm like, I'm just going to play around, I did a good job just to get here. And then I go in with like no
Follow
intensity.
Google Maps.
Yeah. And then I'm like, and I see the guys that, I remember like a distinct event when I saw Alfie Murphy, who's
Middlesbrough.
from Middlesbrough, and I saw him getting ready for his competition. He ended up winning that day at the British Open, and he was just laser focused, like doing his warm up properly. I wasn't warming up. I was like had his headphones on, like wasn't talking to anyone. He was like in the zone, ready to go and try and win. And that might, he could have been.
But
happy.
were you nervous though? Did you have a fear of doing that or anything, or were you not?
No, that's my goal. I don't get too nervous to go compete, whereas I need more nerves for it, like to perform my best. But the best performance I had in competition was because I tried to do a collar drag. I landed in bottom mount, and then I was like, right, I got to switch on now, because then I tapped the guy out in the next like minute and a half. But if I hadn't landed in bottom mount, I might have actually lost that match because I just didn't have the intensity about me. So on the point, I think you should still go in with an idea if you're going to win, because that's what the best way you want to give the best of yourself. So if you're like, and you can't show the best of yourself unless you're really in there to try and win it. Now, it might be completely ridiculous that you're going to try and win. Like if Jeremy Paré is in my division, I'm not going to be winning it. And like he's an adult, brown belt, well, probably different weights, but like I'm not going to be winning that tournament. but there's still loads of benefits I can take from it. I could still meet my goals, and it'd be silly of me to think it was a failure. I was a failure for not winning because I just had 6 months of great training. I've learnt loads. I've got tighter bonds with all the comp team now, so there's loads of things you can gain from it. But I still think it's important to come in with an idea that you're there to compete and do your best and try and win.
I mean, I've got, a fairly large collection of silver medals and only a couple of gold medals. And the reason for that is that I would get to the final in most competitions I competed at and then think, I've done really well to get to the final and not be in the same mindset as I was in the semi-finals to try and win the final. I'm like, I'm happy with this. I'm going on with the medal. Because one of my driving forces was to inspire my kids. So I wanted to take a medal home for them. And because Gabe could hang it on his bed, right? So, because they're like, oh, my dad's won a medal, I want to do it. So that if I had the same mentality in the final as I did in the semis, I probably would have got more golds. Doesn't mean I would be more happy with it. But on reflection, I sold myself short. And here's an analogy for the ocean, right? I was stood waiting to get on the boat. And I had this exact same feeling. I might have said this to Johnny, exact same feeling waiting to get on the boat as I did before competition. It was like I was in the bullpen. But I remember saying to someone, but this time I feel like I'm going for a fight against an opponent I can never beat. It's Mother Nature. So I've got to give my best account of myself, my best performance, and take the least amount of damage. And you can do that in competition. But you've got to go in with the mindset that you want to perform. When we're in competition class, I'm always saying to people, I don't care about the result, but I really care about your performance. If you're going to go, you've got to go and try and perform to your best. And the best way to do that is obviously try and win.
But don't you think it could be a bit of a journey though as well? Because like when I first went and competed, I got so like worked up about it and dealing with controlling my emotions and my breathing and all that kind of stuff, that as I've started to work on that and care less about the result, I feel like over time I'll be able to, that'll just be second nature and I'll be able to focus more on.
To a degree, but I think that, you've got to remember what this is. This is a fight between two people. And so there's a level of intensity that's you can't escape that. And that's why people are scared of it. It's the intensity of the emotion and it's the intensity of the confrontation. And most people, it's like you go outside now and someone bumps into your car and you both get out. That feeling, that adrenaline, that's one of the benefits of jiu-jitsu, is that if you're competing, you experience that adrenaline more and more, it deregulates in normal life. So if you have a boss who's not happy with your performance and that would scare you to death in a meeting, or you want to say something in a meeting, but you were scared to death to put your hand up and say something, now you're probably more likely to do it. But I think you've got to bring the intensity to it.
Yeah.
You absolutely will develop all those other things and they should be part of your focus. But as you step onto the mat, you've got to leave all that behind. And it's no longer it should no longer, in my opinion, be about breathing. And now you're on the mat. Now it's about trying to do my best against you. And you're trying to do the best against me. Because if we don't say that to people, they'll go there with this idea that it's just good enough to get there and they get battered. And that's when they then sometimes walk away and think, why did I do this? I failed.
There's a lot that goes into competing, isn't there? It's not just simply turning up on the day. It is a commitment, but it's a worthwhile commitment. And I suppose an invitation to anyone thinking about the comp class. Professor Victor said to me at my first competition, which went terribly wrong for me, he said your first competition is simply about turning up and aiming to have fun. And I always found that very comforting that, I did look to win that day, but it wasn't ever going to happen, I don't think. But I came away just knowing, by definition, I'm now a jiu-jitsu competitor. Might not be a very good one, but I've still done a competition. And exactly as you say, now if you do get a horrible email, or if someone's not very nice to you on the phone, you do just think, well, I've literally been in the ring with someone who's trying to damage you, and you come out fine, so this is going to be, it's nothing to worry about. But having said that, I know you were talking about potentially competing next year.
I'm
not going to.
No, and the reason for that is, I said that before I went on the row. I was like, I'm going to come back and do the Europeans. And I was on the row thinking, why are you setting yourself another major goal when you've just got back from something as huge as Ronin Ocean? And I've said to a few people now on podcasts and in interviews, and they say, I was on the radio yesterday, like, what's next? Nothing. Because I think the opposite of doing it for the first time is to continue to keep pushing. I don't need to do that. I'm really comfortable with who I am. Everyone has seen the real me and what I'm capable of physically, mentally, emotionally out on the ocean. And really, to be honest, I don't believe there's any event or challenge as difficult as running ocean solo. So to be able to do that and play it all out, I don't need to. If I did one day, yes, but I'm definitely not setting myself the goal to go compete anytime soon. Actually, my focus is how many people can I help compete in here and help them row their own ocean by going to Empire and compete. And that's a better use of my time. Because the other thing, we have to say this about competition, if you're going to compete, you have to prepare. If you're going to row an ocean, you have to prepare. There's 3 people still on the ocean. And I'm sat here. The reason they're still on the ocean is they didn't prepare well. I can say that. And if you're going to go to competition and not prepare, that is a bad idea. You can't just rock up. You've got to do some preparation. And in doing that, there has to be an element of selfishness involved. You have to start prioritising you. So when your partner's saying, should we go out for a few drinks and a meal, and you're cutting weight, you're going to have to say no. When they're saying, should we stop and watch this box set and binge it? And you're like, I need to go to bed because I'm training tomorrow. So if I was going to compete, I couldn't put my all into you guys because I'd be thinking about me. And so I'm not doing that.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, I think you said something before to that effect, haven't you? Like, your development as a jiu-jitsu practitioner doesn't necessarily develop you as a teacher. And the more time you spend teaching and developing people, the less time you have to develop your own jiu-jitsu skills, although your teaching capacity might increase and so on.
Yeah, it's the same as what Mike's saying there. It's like, when you want to focus on competition, you have to be quite selfish in your own jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Whereas when you want to be a good teacher, you have to be selfless.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a contrast of ideas. Similar with you only have a certain amount of time. Like sometimes I'm just in my normal life and focus on my own development on the mats, and then sometimes I'm more focused on like how can I be a better teacher, or sometimes it's how can we get better digital stuff for the business. And sometimes you can't always try and do all 3 at once. Sometimes you just got to have like a couple of weeks here and there where you're doing one, or a month there and you're doing the other. And whereas if you really want to do well at competition, you really need to be focused on it for a while. Like if you want to go from a hobbyist competitor to a competitor of jiu-jitsu, you need to be. That's your. It's
a full-time job.
Yeah.
I've got one for you then. Do you think that cutting weight is necessarily beneficial for competing? Because some people, like I always try and cut weight and go in the category below, but it's like it's intense. I'm usually like low energy, dehydrated.
I see.
Would you say there's that much benefit to doing that, or just sort of stay in the category you're in? It
depends, but I competed at lightweight, so under 76, and did really well. I felt strong in that division. I felt not big, but one of the normal size competitors. I competed at middleweight a couple of times, and they were way too big. And the disparity. Because we're not talking about black belt world champions here, like Kayotera going in the absolute. We're talking about white belts, blue belts, purple belts competing. Like, strength and power will be a differentiator to success. And if you are a blobby 77 kilo guy like I was, and you're against someone who's fighting under 82.3 and they've come down from 86, they're much bigger, much stronger, much longer. So I think if you want to, again, perform well, you should try and be in the division which gives you the best opportunity to do that. Not necessary if you're just going to, but again, I just don't think you should go to competition just to dick about. Like you should be going there to try and push yourself.
I think you got to kind of make your own decision on how it's going to impact your lifestyle compared to how much you want to win that competition.
What you're willing to give.
How important that competition is to you. Because, you could be a new dad of 2 kids and you want to go compete and push yourself, but at the same time, if you then start thinking, right, I'm not getting enough sleep anyway, I'm now going to have to diet down, and like, it might not be the best congruent just for your whole lifestyle. And if you're doing jiu-jitsu to try and improve your life, then putting that extra stress on yourself to now I've got to drop 4 kg in the next 2 months, it might be a little bit extra stress than it's.
Well, here's something to think about. If you were thinking of competing then, or let's say you were a regular competitor, so you competed a couple of times a year, we could probably all do with losing a couple of kilos, like just generally, and to improve our health. So actually the better thing would say, right, I could get down to the next division, but I'm just going to sit at that weight all year round.
Yeah.
So just have a better lifestyle.
Yeah.
So, cut down on some of this stuff. And that would be a fantastic motivator and a fantastic result from competition more broadly in your life, wouldn't it?
There are some crazy people. Tom Ruan, for example, we went to Newcastle and he didn't eat or drink for something like 3 days.
But that's not weight cutting. That's panic dehydration. There's two different things.
He was on death's door.
And again, if you're going to go compete, like we've all done this, we've all eaten just Cocoa Pops for a week to try and just 3 times a day. But it's not conducive to a good performance, is it? So,
yeah, it's not the one that I wouldn't recommend that because he didn't look well. I'd very much not like to be in that position. But then as well, we've got a lot of great nutrition and coaching experts at GBRL, haven't we? So if that was something that someone wanted to do, no doubt we could help with that. So I had a topic. We've been talking about we've been spoken a lot, haven't we, about the journey of jiu-jitsu and how it's a Ronan Keating roller coaster, up and down. And so, it is a banger. Good old Ronan. So, a question perhaps for Professor Mike and Coach T, which was, what's been the most challenging belt or period in your jiu-jitsu career, and how did you overcome it or push through it?
What was your Ronan Keating?
I don't know who Ronan Keating is.
Shut up. Are you joking?
No.
Life's a roller coaster.
Stop.
Just go to
Boyzone.
yeah.
No.
Hell?
He did the tune to Notting
let's
Hill.
not spend the whole
Okay.
Right. I'll sing you some songs.
Coach T to understand who the 90s boy bands
Is
are.
he?
Okay.
We weren't even born in 1990.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Okay, I'll go first. So my most challenging belt was black belt, for sure, 100%. When I got my black belt, I'd obviously achieved the goal that I'd been working towards for many, many years. And I didn't really have I didn't really think past it.
Yeah.
So I was helping out teaching at Harrogate, and Professor Lewis will tell you all about this. But I was kind of then a bit lost. I was like, well, I'm not a head instructor. I'm not an academy owner. I'm just a black belt who keeps turning up. And for me, that kind of weren't enough. So I just I started training a little bit less. I had less focus on my own jiu-jitsu. And that was really tricky. Then we opened this place up, and that reignited the fire in me to help other people through jiu-jitsu. But again, I've not focused on my own jiu-jitsu since we opened this place. I've not learned anything new. I just keep giving it all away. So, and you might argue, well, as an instructor, you need to be continuous. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But what I want to do is I need to be developing my own jiu-jitsu. And I think that's really hard when you're a black belt and you're trying to give everything to everyone else. Again, it goes back to that focus thing. So as a white belt, there was absolutely no pressure. There never is. As a white belt, you're supposed to be shit. You are shit. Enjoy being shit. And then you get good and you become a blue belt. And for a lot of people, there's pressure there, but I didn't feel that. I felt that was like the pressure was off. I had loads of time to develop as a blue belt. Purple belt, I was training 5-6 times a week, sometimes every day in Canada, having a great time. Same as brown belt. And then it got difficult at black belt for me. That was the hardest one for me. And still is to a degree, because the relationship between you and everyone you're rolling with, particularly when they're students, changes. Like, the only time I'm really pushed is with Professor Lewis or Khalil or people like that.
Yeah.
Partly that is not because my students can't push me, it's because they don't bring their A game when they're rolling with me as well.
Yes.
And I know that, and it's a bit strange. So competition class for me is great because you get to mix it again.
How soon, but how close was you getting your black belt into opening GBRL?
Yeah. And did you always know you were going to do that when you trained, or was it? just something.
We always joked, like, and we always said, me and Khalil and Lewis, like, this area needed jiu-jitsu. But no, I never thought I'd open an academy because I had a good job when I was working away and stuff. So I got my black belt in 2017.
Okay.
Opened it in 2020. And then obviously this year I'll be getting my second degree. So I've been black belt 6 years. But I've trained for 20 odd years, like on and off, you know.
That's a crazy amount of time, 20 years jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't like 6 times. I mean, there weren't jiu-jitsu then, right? So you were watching DVDs and trying to learn it in your bedroom or whatever. So black belt is definitely different. But people will go through different phases, I think. But when you achieve your goal, you've got to then set new goals, right?
Yeah.
It can't be like I've achieved it and I think for me, I was focusing on other stuff and so my jiu-jitsu dropped a bit. Yeah. And that hurt me a bit.
Coach T.
Was it challenging belt or challenging times or what?
Oh, either or. Just which have you had what was your most challenging period during your jiu-jitsu career for whatever reason? It may be that you just say, I found blue belt really hard, or
there's 3 that come to mind. About 6 months after I started jiu-jitsu, my brother passed away, and then that was kind of like a double-edged, because like I was obviously really upset, but then at the same time, Mike and Jim Munton really looked after me, and I think that's really what got me more passionate about jiu-jitsu, because I felt the community side of it.
Yeah.
When I got my blue belt, about a week later, I travelled to Thailand, and that was difficult because I was a fresh belt, but in a new academy.
Yeah.
And whenever you go traveling and you go to a new academy, they're gonna like test you.
Yeah.
And so, but they weren't testing me as a white belt, which I was 4 days prior.
Yeah.
They're testing me as a blue belt, and now like.
Did you say that to anyone?
No, I didn't.
I only got it a week.
No.
I got my purple belt on the phone off Victor on the way to Canada. Same thing.
Yeah.
Did you have a belt with you?
No, he said buy one when you get there.
Yeah. I only said it to the head instructor there about 2.5 months after I had been there. When I was doing a podcast with him. He's like, oh, right.
That's why you shit.
Yeah. And so that was a tough time, because I was just, rolling people and getting smashed all the time. And like, it's just the same as when you be blue belt anywhere else, you're not beating the white belts. Like you're not, suddenly smashing every white belt. All of a sudden, the silver white belts giving you just as hard as rolls they were the other day. But then there's the expectation of you of a new academy, but you're also representing your own academy back home, represent your own country at that level. So it's like, that was tough. And the other thing that came to mind was actually just when I got my brown belt. Like, I really felt quite undeserving of it. And to some extent, it was just like, only for maybe a week or 2, but I was just like, it actually like removed my love of jiu-jitsu a little bit. Like for about a week, just was like, but then I just kind of got over it. I was speaking to Victor and Jeremy and Mike. And, it's so arbitrary, the belts, that it's like, I'm a brown belt and Jeremy's a brown belt,
Has he got that recently? The brown belt?
A while back, but and then for a time after I got mine, to Andrew Tackett was a brown belt. It's like the difference between all those 3 is like there's leaps and bounds. It's like, and there's we went to Portugal and there's brown belts who are 50 years old and you could roll with them pretty well. And so it's so arbitrary in the journey, and that's what.
But it's still, even though it is arbitrary, it still did have the effect of wobbling you a little bit
until I came more and more to that realization.
Isn't that one of the purpose of the belts? It certainly is for me.
Yeah.
You should never get a belt when you feel like you deserve it and you're ready for it. It should always be at a time where you're not ready for that belt, and you have to grow into it. You probably weren't ready for your blue belt. You probably weren't ready for yours. Presumably ready for your brown belt. I certainly didn't expect my black belt. I was even injured. I couldn't even train. So it should come, because that's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
That imposter syndrome, that feeling like you don't deserve it. It's like a promotion at work, Oh, how am I going to start managing these 6 people that I was peers with? Or there's this expectation. That is part of the challenge. And you got your brown belt early, but you got it because you deserved it. And you wouldn't have got it if you didn't deserve it. And for that, and we'll just talk briefly on that, like, I consulted Victor deeply on that, and I was like, and with Lewis, and I was like, thinking of this, but what do you think? And no one said no. Everyone said yeah. And it was nothing to do with, yeah, but you can't beat Jeremy Parry. That didn't even come into it. The jiu-jitsu didn't come into it. It was like, what is this experience? What experience has this person got? How good are they able to impart that experience onto other people and develop their own students as an owner and an instructor in this academy? And what's their technical jiu-jitsu like? And it was like, it's a brown belt. Simple as that.
You got quite deep anyway.
I think there's something in that, like, you know, people getting promoted, the way that I feel of it now is when someone gets a big promotion, we all share in that moment. Like Ollie Goss, you know, who I understand was your first blue belt promotion. Like that really moved me, sharing that movement together. And I'd been with Ollie the previous weekend to the competition, British Open, where he'd won. Like that was a really special night. And you know, you're getting your purple belt and then brown belt. Like they were moving, and you're getting you know, your first stripe from Aggressive Victor when he was over. Those things are, in this jiu-jitsu world that we live in, they are meaningful and they are
You've only
profound.
got to look at, you know, when someone starts giving their blue belt speech and they start tearing up, but you look around the room and there's everyone else is tearing up. Oh,
and it is, you know, it's not because it's the piece of cloth, it's what the piece of cloth represents, isn't it? That's the meaningful thing. So they are arbitrary. But then that's the paradox with jiu-jitsu, isn't it? Is yes, the belts are arbitrary, but then at the same time, they are very meaningful, perhaps not always for the reasons that people associate with them. Like it was meaningful for me, for example, when you got your brown belt, because it came from Professor Mike to you, because it was a recognition of the work you put into your teaching, you know, and how far it seems that you've come and how that's recognized. That's awesome. That's really cool. And on the imposter thing, I don't know if you felt you weren't ready for it, but I took comfort.
No one thought she was ready for it. I was like, has he gone mad?
She is. Thanks.
But that was completely
I had like an
out of the blue.
absolute meltdown over it. Because I think I've spoke.
Yes,
Well,
I
not-
know he's spoken. Didn't want to put
But I
words.
didn't plan to give you that belt that day.
No.
That's why it was a
I
surprise.
think I spoke about this as well, but I then felt like I had to then prove myself, which in hindsight was the wrong thing to do, which is why I went and signed up for like GB3.
Yes.
I decided I was going to do all the things that made me feel uncomfortable, which was the wrong mindset to have, but in hindsight now it's made me more confident and all that kind of stuff. But that's what I felt like I had to do. I was like, well, I'm not a blue belt, so I need to go be a blue belt.
Yes.
That's what I felt like I had to do.
Not too dissimilar to kind of what Coach T was saying.
It's made you too
What were
confident.
you
if anything.
whispering? I can tell you were whispering
She starts just
something.
talking shit to me during the rounds now. She's like,
It's made you much better at jiu-jitsu, and it's made you a much, not just that, but in my opinion anyway, a much more confident person on the mat. So sometimes, you know, like, and that I think that's a nice thing for us, you know, an instructor or a professor to do. You're constantly thinking about the individual when you're promoting someone. It's not like there's like 10 things you've got, and I hate personally academies that have criteria for people and you've got to go do a test. It takes all the personality away. Like each individual student is unique, and the way I view them, we view them, is a unique person. And some people need that little bit of extra push and to grow into a belt. Some people need to be held back a little bit and humbled a little bit before they get it. And that's the nice thing. And so when you do get it, then it is super meaningful.
And I think, like you said, when you get it, even though I felt like I didn't deserve it, everyone always says, well, you won't have it if you didn't deserve it. So it gives you that little bit of self-belief that then makes you probably more confident. So then you get a bit more.
I didn't have the, I said this to you the other night when we were on the side of the mat, I didn't have the imposter syndrome, and I reflected on that. And I don't think it's because I'm arrogant about my capabilities. I think I'm actually quite damning of them. But I think it's just because I have not been doing jiu-jitsu for 20 years. I don't know as much as a black belt knows. So if Professor Mike says, you're going to have your blue belt, that's good enough for me. And if anyone's got a problem with it, it's not my problem. Do you know what I mean? So I'm quite comfortable. I'm quite comfortable thinking, well, if Professor Mike thinks that I'm ready for it, then that's fine by me. And I actually found that my motivation, although I was very motivated as a 4-stripe white belt, it went through the roof. So I did when you were away, I did the 30 hours of jiu-jitsu between the 1st of December and Christmas Day, purely because I was buzzing about training and hated the idea of having Christmas off. And I wouldn't have done that, I don't think, if I hadn't had my blue belt.
That helped me a lot when I got my brown belt, because I was thinking, like, when I spoke to, like, because the next day we went to the Nottingham conference, I was speaking to Victor and Lewis, and they were basically just like, it's not your choice at the end of the day, so you might as well have a stoic kind of thing about it. Like, you don't get to put it on and you don't get to take it off, really. So, and Mike said the same thing to me when I got my blue belt. We were driving back in the car, me, Jim and Mike, and we were joking around, and I think I joked, laughing, and I was joking like, I'm going to take my blue belt off and put my white belt back on when I'm travelling. And Mike's like, in my head, he like slammed on the brakes and looks at me like dead in the eye, seriously, like, if I ever see you take that fucking blue belt off, I'll have a problem with you. He didn't do it like that, but like,
that sounds kind of
he maybe didn't slam on the brakes, but he did say like very serious. He's like, oh, okay, no shit. Like, he wasn't joking about that. Yeah.
Well, we get people coming to the academy all the time. I've trained whatever, I'm a blue belt, but I want to start again. It's like, you don't get to start again. It's not your choice. Like, that is the rank you're at. And the only reason you want to do that is because you're in your own ego. You want to perform better. You want to sandbag it through. I think it's not. I don't believe the belt system is arbitrary. I just think should not be your focus.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it means a lot for a lot of people to be promoted and to be recognised. Probably is the better word, by the peers, by their instructors, by the communities. Not only someone who's, because it's not the technique, it's the journey you've had to take to get to that point where someone says you are now deserving of X. That's countless hours of suffering. And where else in life do you work that hard for something you could tie your dressing gown with? Like, it's a piece of cloth. Yeah. But like you said, the meaning behind it is so deep because it's so difficult to achieve. And if we go back to what Coach T said earlier, the courage to walk in and do your first class is so big. When you get to blue belt, you've done that over and over and over. That says a lot about you, man. Yeah. So wear it with pride.
Good stuff. Well, that seems like a good place to end it. You got another podcast to get to shortly.
Yep.
I got to go make sure all Loki the dog's all right.
Nice. Say hello from me.
You fancy bringing him on? I'm off to the gym.
Lauren's off to the gym?
Yeah, I am going to the gym. Although I don't know about my wrist. Right hand, not wrist.
You have to not do your Beyonce routine.
I do spend most of the time in the gym just fucking around.
And Tom, back to work, is it?
Back to work. These emails won't send themselves.
Pajamas back on.
Put my slippers are going straight back on. Honestly, I missed them.
I think he's going to go to his cat. I would have your life. I would have your life.
It's tempting. It's tempting. Yeah. Back to the office.
All right, team. Till next week. Oops.